totally stoked to have you both here, the Changer Boys. Thank you so much for joining us on the Scrunch Influencer Marketing Show. Yes, we've known each other, God, I don't know, maybe like 5, 6+ years now. So, you know, we met you guys, I think, when you were, you know, really heavily video orientated, but over that time, you know, you guys are probably the first ones that I saw move into creators and supporting creators. So I'm absolutely stoked to have you both here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Good to hang out.
I know, even virtually. Pity it's over coffee and not cocktails, but that's okay.
I know.
So why don't we start with a bit of our background? So the people who tune in to the Influencer Marketing Show tend to be more brands, marketers, agencies. So love to get a bit of both of your backgrounds, introduce yourself, and, you know, how you got to actually starting Changer.
I'll let Anne take this.
Just pointing at me. Well,
love it.
I'll tell my story. You can tell yours.
Yeah, sure.
As I famously once said, what was it, Fred? I like to use words, so bear with me. Many
That's great. I'll sit back and relax.
Sit back and relax, Danny.
You're on.
I've got this. I'm from I've always I've come from a marketing and creative background always, but the creators that I sort of talking about to start with were really, I started off in working in art galleries and independent art theatre, bit of a mishmash, but also in marketing and helping those artists, both across theatre and visual artists, market themselves. Which the theatre crew are really happy to market themselves because they sell tickets to their shows. Artists, the visual artists are selling out, so it's an interesting combination, which is not true. They're not selling out.
No.
And so I've sort of
that is a legacy feeling, isn't it, though?
It is.
I think a lot more creatives are realizing that money isn't such a bad thing now, which I like.
Exactly. Yeah, I hope so.
Lets you create more.
That's right. You got to make a living. It's, you know, it's one of those things, and it's not a dirty thing. But that's sort of started, and then I worked around a bunch of marketing roles in big retail, and then sort of moved over into advertising and production. But always underpinning that was like working with like the creative side of things, and like that sort of mix of creative and commercialization. And then sort of saw, you know, in the video and production space that there was this thing online, like online content. We're probably going back 10 years or so, and it was really devalued. It was like, oh, you know, we'd spend $1 million in just producing a TV commercial, just to produce it, just to shoot the thing. And then it'd be like, oh, and there's this other bit, it's just for online. And like, I'm like, just for online, like that's the world, that's the audience. Whereas the $1 million went into like reaching, you know,
the wrong people on TV.
20,000 people or something on some crazy demographic, couple of 100,000 people in Australia only. And so I sort of saw that and was getting a bit frustrated, but also saw the opportunity for the creators, like the online video space. And then met Fred at a very similar time. I think he was having a similar sort of journey, and we sort of, he can stitch the rest of it back together, but we also saw like this online video creator space, and saw that these guys are doing really amazing things, but lack the support and structure and the community to really go from, you know, being devalued at the bottom of the food chain to actually like they're going to blow up and they are doing amazing things and sort of make that successful and sustainable. And we could probably have a part in that. Fred.
Yeah. Well, you know,
he's I concur.
I was in media too, but I started in digital media. So while at university, but my cousin and I, we started a digital agency based around what we thought would be sort of the future of web. And we were thinking, oh, people would need to manage their websites. So how about we build some software to help them do that online? And that was effectively cloud-based software when, cloud-based software wasn't really a thing. So trying to convince people to, put their trust in the cloud was an interesting thing, but it did do well. And over time, as we grew that became pretty interesting, and it grew into a pretty big digital agency. And I started to think to myself, I like this, but I'm not really in love with this. I want to do more. And I would always like video. And it was a big thing for me. And we started to steer the agency towards that. But I realized, like, we were actually building software, and that was sort of the base of the company at that time. And it was not the direction it was going in. So I thought, okay, let's spin out something else. And that's about the time we sort of seeing the potential growth in the online video space, which was really interesting. And around 2010 stuff, we started dabbling in a bit more video. And over the next couple of years, we started building some ideas around what the future of video looked like. And that's when I started chatting to a mutual friend about it. And he was like, oh, I know this other guy called Ant who's also really interested in this area. Why don't you guys get together and have a chat? And that's when we
can name check that guy.
Yeah.
We can name check.
Name check. Yeah.
That's
oh,
Ben
nice.
Johnson, Mark. So we both knew Ben. We didn't know each other, and we were having a very similar conversation with Ben, saying, like, there's this awesome stuff going on. There's awesome opportunity.
That's how, like, everyone who I know who knows Ben's stories start.
Yeah. Like, Ben and I were drinking at a wonderful bar called The End a lot. And we kept calling them meetings. And I think
strategy session.
I don't know what. But yeah, and then Ben invited Fred to a meeting, and we had some beers, and then next day we had a coffee, and I think 2 days later we were working together. Like, it was rock and roll. Like,
that's so good. Yeah. But so then talk to me. You said the words 2010 and online video taking off, but I'm like, it's 2022, and I still think there are people that are just getting their heads around video. What have you seen happen in the last 10 years? How did you spot it back then?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I guess
this is going to be a long chat.
I can answer that really simple. We're just pure visionaries.
I would expect nothing less.
Yeah. No, if only. No, Fred can answer it better than that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was sort of like when we were talking about, when we started in cloud-based software, the way we looked at it was like, you could see that people move towards like this convergence and this collaboration element. They look towards sort of how to, the next logical step. It seems like that just seemed like this would be the next logical step. Also, there was such great talent. You could just see, like, some of the online creators, even though it's very early days, they had such great talent. And you could just see that things were moving towards this digital distribution of content. And what that would mean, I think what we both saw was that meant there would be a whole lot of really impressive, talented individuals coming on with these new platforms and new technologies who are going to be able to amplify their voice. And back then, the amplification wasn't brilliant. But we could tell, just knowing where the technology goes, that it was going to get better and better and more engaging, and that would give bigger networks a run for its money. So we sort of see that. Then, I guess the tricky thing was convincing everybody else that was actually happening as well, which wasn't the easiest thing, especially in the early days. So we actually ended up, when we first started, working with a sort of more commercial division where we worked with brands more actively to create online video content for the brands using some of these new methodologies, because that was an easier bridge than trying to get straight into that other space. And that actually ended up working out pretty well, because we were bringing new methodologies, new ideas to brands, and got their content more engaging and more geared for the online space. And that actually ended up being quite a good thing for us. And I think the next step from there was like, okay, well, how do we really get into the creative space? And that's sort of where Changer really started to find its feet. And Changer, as it is now, is designed to help elevate the next generation of creative talent online, right? We provide resources and education and, funding in some cases to help creators get to the next level, elevate their channels, build businesses around, their content creation. And that's predominantly the core elements of what we do now. But yeah, that's where it effectively all started from.
And do you sort of work exclusively with video creators? So, I guess when I hear video creator, I think YouTube. Is that kind of the crux of it, or are there channels that I don't know about that I should know about?
Well, yeah, predominantly it is video
Yes.
creators, yeah, and,
Yes.
and YouTube is still, I guess, in many ways the gold standard of that type of video. And now it's funny because they call YouTube long form, and we used to call it short form, and now short form is like TikTok, and it's very different. But yeah, look, we predominantly look at online video creators. We work very extensively with YouTube, but now with all the other platforms, we do look at everything. We look at it more holistically because for most creators, they use multiple platforms in different ways in order to create that engagement with the audience.
Yeah, okay, and that's really interesting because, so I guess in my world, so I probably have a background more in what we call influencer marketing, and influencer marketing is still, so whilst they've jumped on TikTok, but very heavily rooted in Instagram as a platform, so very heavily image-based, yes, moving into sort of that short-form video content now, but also heavily relying on sponsored posts as means of making money. And as you were talking then, I love what you said around, basically your unique value proposition. What you do is help these creators actually go from content creator to building a business. And, I wondered, like, when you talk to creators, are they all super on board with that? Do they know this? Do they see the value? Like, what's your experience with creators and the bridge from going to I create cool videos to I'm a business owner?
I think this has been some of the most interesting things about the creator space. I mean, that's for us. I think for most, a lot of people, they find it frustrating is that creators are very varied, right? They're not like, someone who has a startup or who thinks of themselves as a startup entrepreneur. Like, they have a set path, they're in it to build a product and build a business around that product. Whereas a lot of creators, they start because they like the idea of something. They're creating around something and sharing a passion or an interest. And then getting them to think of it sometimes as a business, or thinking of themselves as entrepreneurs, it can be a tricky thing. Some creators are great and they're just sort of straight on board with that, but other creators, it takes a while to get into that thinking. But also taking that leap into that entrepreneurial thinking can also sort of change their mindset. They go from making it about the content creation to then making it about a business, and that can create issues as well. So there's a whole bunch of sort of subtle things we look at or balances we try to create in order to make that pathway as smooth as possible. But with every creator, there is a pathway to entrepreneurship. It just varies from creator to creator. I think Ant will probably agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, every creator can essentially be a founder of like a brilliant, not just media company, but like a really like direct to consumer brand company, right? But whether they want to be or that's their best skill set is, and like, so it's not just like there's no, and that's what's really tricky about this space is it's not just like a creator is X or Y or Z. It's not even three buckets. You can't even, so it's the nuances are quite interesting. And then going back to like the start, like, do creators even think of themselves as entrepreneurs? Like, I've had many conversations with YouTube creators with millions and millions of subscribers, and they've got 20 people working for them, and it's like, I'm just a YouTuber. Yeah, okay. Like,
I wish I was just a YouTuber, if that's the
And we run like workshops all over the world. A lot of them in partnership with YouTube, and one of the early ones, I'm trying to think back what year, maybe 2016 or so, we ran one called Creative Entrepreneurship, like for YouTubers, and like it was the hardest sell to get it in there. We had Jim Louderback come to us, like he was in Australia. We got him to come along and talk about, like, he's at the time newly announced GM of Bitcoin, and a couple other really like entrepreneurial YouTube creators, and it's kind of like, oh, hang on, like, people don't identify as entrepreneurs as like the creators aren't really seeing that yet, but we should still show them that the opportunity exists, and just figure out how we can package that up in a way that they can understand where they fit within this space. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So as I've done more research into what we're now calling the creator economy, they are saying they're lumping 50 million creators into that bucket. But I'm like, well, I'm not sure if that's the right way to look at it, because you're spot on. Most of those creators think of themselves as creators. They don't think about themselves as the business owner or the founder or the CEO or the whatever. So I think it's really interesting when yes, absolutely. You've got to open people's eyes to what's possible, but you also have to understand that the majority of them probably aren't going to be on board, that you're serving kind of a subsection of that market.
Yeah, exactly. And look, and one of the things we're sort of very well known for is our accelerated programs, which we pioneered. We actually pioneered with Google years and years ago, where we ran the first programs in the world for creators to basically help them accelerate their growth, not just looking at, you know, how to grow their channels, but how to grow their businesses. And we sort of developed this process that helped them better understand not just like not their channels, but like what they can achieve with creative businesses, and exposing them to some of the experts that Ant mentioned. And once they sort of see the landscape and you give it to them in a sort of structured way and say, look, these are the opportunities that sit in front of you, that's when they can look at it and go, oh yeah, like this now makes sense to me. I can understand where I might want to take this as a business, but I can still be, you know, a great creator and still make great content. It's not about sacrificing one for the other. So, you know, like every creator will have a pathway, but it is interesting because they all sort of choose slightly different ways to get there.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, you know, because we do a lot and, you know, you guys have plenty of business owner friends, you know, I find it really interesting when you think of the word creator. Like oftentimes you do think of just creators putting things out online, and a lot of times they're focused on great content and building their followers and kind of then hoping that the money or the sponsorships will flow on. And what we're talking about is, you know, creating this business. And it's almost like I look at other people that I know who are more business owners, and I think, you know, you need to have that creator mindset and really understand that it's about putting something cool, value in your niche out in the world. But the audience size is less and less the thing that matters. I mean, absolutely, if you have 1 million followers, perhaps you're going to be doing well, you know, lots of opportunities. But depending on what your goals are as a creator or a business owner, it might not be the be all and end all. You know, if you have like a revenue figure, you just want to replace your full-time salary or whatever it is, you don't always need the 1 million followers. It is actually about understanding what products you can actually create, how you can serve that audience. I think that there's like a real opportunity for creators and even businesses as creators, like to actually look at things differently now.
That's right. And at the end of the day, it comes down to value creation. And this is one of the things we try to teach all the creators. Because we work with emerging creators. That's, you know, typically creators who are like that 5,000 or 100,000 subscriber mark, who are really developing they're still developing on their journey, but they think they need to get to that 1 million subscriber mark before it's all worthwhile. And that's not true at all. I mean, you know, we've seen tons of small creators, you know, with traditionally small numbers of subscribers do very well because they're very good at creating value, right?
Yeah.
And we're in this period where you need to create specific value for the audience in order for them to give you their attention. And that's effectively the currency we're dealing in is attention, right? So how do we get that? So if you provide them with enough value and you get their attention and you can connect with them in the way that, you know, things like YouTube let you connect with your audience, you're going to create something really meaningful. And when you do that, then effectively you can own that audience. And then, you know, even a few thousand people giving you, you know, a few dollars each can be extremely valuable for a creator.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because so being in this space, I have stopped watching. So because there is so much content coming at me, I've stopped watching anything. And, you know, where this goes up on YouTube. So now I'm on YouTube more than ever. And the other day I saw Phoebe from Little Grey Box, a video she put up. And I know she's a co-host now, isn't she, on the Creative Generation, which is so cool. She was like one of the first, well, we thought she was an influencer back then. She was one of the first creators that we worked with, and her, and it's Matt, isn't it? Yep. So cool. But it's really interesting because I've seen her content for so long and I've not really been consuming it. But I know her, worked with her, seen her on your show. And then this video came up, and it's like, I don't have 20 minutes to watch a video, but this video came up and I was like, oh, cool. What's she doing these days? Watched it. And I watched the whole video and I was like, I'm going to that place. That's awesome. Like it was so cool. And I know like they have come such a long way over the last, even just, you know, few years. I know that they've like, really grown heaps, but it's just really interesting that, you know, what value do you provide an audience and how do you communicate that? And that is the thing that gets people's attention. And it's really interesting. Like, you know, she doesn't know this, but through her content, she's building a relationship with me so now I trust her recommendations, and I will sit there and I will watch the video because I want to know what it's all about. And I think that's, something creators really need to, it's not just the content, it is that connection with the audience, and it's that community that they're building.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
Phoebe knows.
Phoebe does.
She knows.
She's building a relationship.
Totally.
Yeah. She's not manipulating you. She's genuinely.
Oh, I'm happy to be manipulated.
Relationship with her audience, and those two are a great example. They're husband and wife creator team, but they're on many platforms creating content, not just on YouTube, Instagram. Getting dipping their toes in TikTok, but like a lot of their businesses also, like their website, and then creating travel content for tourism bodies all over the world. So it's symbiotic. It's like a real ecosystem business. And when you look at their YouTube subscriber numbers, I haven't got in front of me. Sorry, Phoebe. It's about 60,000, maybe a bit more, 70. And that's a business. It's a full-time business. So
well, and that's really interesting too, like talking about the ecosystem. And you mentioned, yes, they're on YouTube, but they're also on other social channels like Instagram, TikTok, but then website, and then creating content for tourism bodies. So, one thing we always hear about is the algorithm. And, and I always say to someone, because a lot of business owners, they're like, how do I get more followers on Instagram? And I'm like, Instagram isn't a business model, and it's owning your audience and owning that community and owning that relationship. I find a really interesting conversation that not a lot of people have. What's your perspective on that and actually owning your ability to create a business?
A perspective on owning an audience, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like how, is it, all I do is have a YouTube channel and hope that that people come back, or do you give advice on websites, on email lists? Like, how do you talk to creators around building out a business and owning your audience?
And like you said, it's a good topic, because the idea of audience ownership is becoming really important. These platforms are really great. They let you put your content out to the entire world, but often they will limit the way in which you can communicate and engage with your audience, like YouTube, TikTok, all that. You have limited ways in which you interact with that audience. So owning your audience is basically being able to have that even closer relationship. And, that's why I think a lot of email newsletters have come back into fashion in a big way, because, it's direct communication. You can communicate with them pretty easily. They can get a lot of specific information from you. So this idea of audience ownership is getting bigger. There are more tools available to the creator economy that lets you own your audience better. In fact, on our podcast, we had a chat to Patreon. I think it was last week, Dylan Harari from Patreon.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you. and we were talking about audience ownership being a big thing, because a platform like Patreon, which is effectively a membership-based platform, or as they say, like the OnlyFans for creators. That was an interesting way of thinking, right? It lets you basically create content, put on the platform, but then members can have that more direct relationship with you, and you can have that more direct relationship with your members. And effectively are more able to own that audience because of that connection you have to them, because they're basically so much closer to you. So it is a bigger area. It's an area where we do help creators understand more. Like I said, every creator has a different journey. Everyone will approach it in a different way. But this idea of being closer to your audience and engaging with them more, connecting with them more, being able to communicate with them more clearly and directly is a big area we really are pushing heavily into, because like you said, there's more and more content being thrown to people. The algorithms are serving people content left, right, and center. If you don't connect and have that audience close to you, you can lose out on a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. And, Patreon's a really interesting one. I've known about it for a while, but never really engaged with it and never used it to support anybody. But it was really interesting. My partner is a patron of a YouTuber. I don't know if it's like a Mr. Who's the Boss or one of those guys, and like he literally sat me down one day and was like, look, this is my name at the end of the video. And I'm like, oh, people are into this. People are really into this. I'm like, you pay money to this guy who makes YouTube videos every month, and you wait and look at your name at the end. I'm like, this is huge. Like, people love this. You know, we don't want to turn on the TV anymore and just see some news presenters giving us the daily updates. Like, we want to support people who we actually care about the content that they create, and the appetite's there. I think that, you know, creators sometimes feel a little bit like, oh, will people actually be into this? Does my community really care about what I'm doing? But they do. Like, people are obsessed with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to value exchange, right? Like, your partner gets value from seeing his name up in lights on his favorite creators channel, right? But and, you know, things like Patreon or memberships or and just like the community, like, you can go as deep as you want. Like, you know, those Patreons can, like, at a certain tier, potentially impact the content. They can be involved in writing it, right? Like, they can get special access to content that no one else can get. So they can be really close and invested in it. Sometimes it's just purely they want to make sure the lights get kept on and their favorite videos come out every week, month, or year, or whatever it might be. But then, and that's valuable as well, right? Like, if your favorite TV show's been cancelled by Netflix, which is probably most people this year, because they do season 1 of everything. Like, imagine if you could put your hand in your pocket and put a couple of bucks in a month, and everyone did that around the world. Like, you'd be probably get your show back up, and you'd be happy, and you'd feel more invested in it, and you'd tell everyone else about it. So there's a lot that brands can learn from this type of thing as well, right? Like, that value exchange beyond the product exchange. Sorry,
that's spot on, Ad, because that's something that I think a lot of brands and a lot of traditional, you know, agencies and producers didn't see. Was they keep thinking about, you know, entertainment value, right? But they didn't see the true value that all the other types of value that, like, YouTubers and creators create, right? Like relational value, which is like, you know, why vlogging is so big, or even like you talked about your partner being able to have his name on the screen. It's just it's a small thing, but it's so meaningful, right? That's what it comes down to, is like, what is meaningful to an audience. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I have to be blown away by over the top special effects, which is why, you know, things like Quibi may have failed, is because they always thought if we bring production value to it, that's what people are after. But it's not about that. There's a whole bunch of other elements to it that are so important. And, you know, if brands better understood that, I think they'd have a much better or much easier time in understanding how they can align with creators to create, you know, better connections with their audiences.
Well, and so therein is my question to you, because I have been banging on for the last few years about it's more than just a sponsored post. You know, what do you see the future of brands collaborating with creators? Like, how do you think it needs?
Sorry, Danny.
Did I just cut out?
You dropped out. You did. Yeah. So we didn't hear the question. You cut out. Yeah.
That's all right. So how do you think brands will collaborate differently with creators in the future? Do you, because I keep saying it's not a sponsored post anymore. We have to have a deeper relationship. But, you know, I think it's super easy to just gift a product to somebody or to pay a sponsored post fee and say, I'll have these X deliverables. How do you think we need to think about things differently?
Yeah, it's actually a question every time we do an accelerator or a program, we always ask the creators, like, what has your experience been with brands, and what are the issues you face? What do you like and dislike? And it's interesting over the years hearing how things have developed. One is obviously brands are a lot more comfortable working with creators now. And, you know, it's becoming a little bit more professional. Creators understand that they have to be more professional. And I think that's creating better results for brands. But it is interesting looking at the models develop, right? There are different ways to do it. A lot of brands came to it in a very traditional way. Here's what you wanted to say, A, B, and C, say this, and that'll be great. And I think they are realizing now that looking at the way the creator interacts with their audience and what the audience values is a very important part in creating some meaningful conversion for that brand, right? If they don't think about that, then all they're going to do is have this sort of very plasticky approach to the audience, and it's not going to get any effect. But if they let the creator guide them and say, hey, look, this is what we think will work, I think that's an important bet. And we're telling all the creators who go through our programs, like, don't be afraid to tell the brands that you might have a better idea for what might work with your audience, because that's what you've been doing for all these years, is developing this relationship with your audience, and you know what they like, you know what they dislike. Feel free to tell the brand this. And we've had creators we've worked with who are some of the best in the world, and they took this approach early on. They were like, oh, like a big VPN would come to them and say, we want you to read the script. And 99% of creators would. And, one creator we worked with, the internet historian, who's an absolute brilliant
legend.
Creator. Yeah.
Yep.
And he was like, I don't think this would work like this. How about I set it up differently? And I make basically this character based around your VPN. And we take it really into left field. Like, it was really out there, crazy kind of stuff. And to their credit, the brand looked at it and go, you know what? I think you know your audience best, and we'll do it. And it was a phenomenal campaign. It was entertaining. In fact, most of the comments were about the ad, right? About the ad and about the integration.
That's so
and
cool.
About the video itself, right? And it went on to do tremendously well. And he actually created this character for the brand, but just kept it coming back in future episodes. And it built such a good connection. But they just listened to that. They listened to the creator, and they knew what kind of value the creator was generating for the audience. What the audience valued. And by doing that, they had a tremendously popular campaign. And, we've replicated that a bit in other videos, and it has also done extremely well. So yeah, I think that's the future, is just basically letting the creator sort of guide you a little bit in terms of what that audience will connect with. Because if you listen to that and you're willing to experiment a little bit with that, I think you're going to have a much better outcome.
And I think what's really interesting for the creator is, and that's longevity for their business. So it's like, it wasn't just I read the script, I got paid, and that's done. I actually understood what my audience wanted, created something awesome, it performed, and now they're coming back for
yeah. Whoop.
Cut out again there.
Sorry about my shocking internet.
But I mean, I like, the thing is, what we're saying, and I wholeheartedly agree, it's still it's challenging for brands in the current way, most brands in the current way they work. Like, so it does require, like, this approach does require a bit of a shift, where like more effort up front in due diligence on the creator and selecting your creator and aligning with them. But the return on, and so like the objective should be different. Instead of getting like X number of creators doing so many ad reads, and we'll record it based on like potential reach based on their surface level numbers. Let's look at it from like, okay, you're going to get longer term impact and conversions, but also like looking to build relationships then, right? Like, talking about Internet Historian, there is an example, like that's then like a very aligned brand when we're talking NordVPN and Nordman, like the particular character that Brad's talking about. But that keeps coming back, and then like, there's like returning value for the creator, the audience, and the brand, and that's like, a beautiful thing, right? Everyone wins. Like, so it's harder it takes a little bit more effort up front, but the returns are greater. So like it just depends. Like, and instead of doing more, maybe you do less with more impact. Or so it's a bit of a mindset shift as well. Like, it's not just about what us as a brand wants to get across. It's like what like the creator is going to have needs in communicating to their audience, and the audience needs to get something out of that, and it won't serve your purpose as a brand if you don't fit those other two needs as well. So it's just a bit of a flip, but not too dramatic. Like, you get what you want out of it, so that's what counts, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because historically a lot of the brand, so collaborations between creators and brands, or influencers and brands, has largely fallen to somebody who's in a dual role. They're a marketing manager, social media manager, PR person, and they're in the marketing team, but they're wearing a lot of hats. And it's interesting, we were doing a little study this year, and now if you look up influencer marketing professional on LinkedIn, there's like 50,000 of them, who are now in dedicated roles for, influencer marketing or working with partnerships or creators. And I think that is where we will see the shift, because I think you're right. Like, the time investment up front to really do that due diligence, understand the creator, not give the exact same brief to 50 creators, but actually talk to each one and go, you know, this is what we had in mind. These are the guide rails, but what do you think? You know, do you want to come back to us with some ideas on what might work best with your audience? You know, that's time consuming, right? But my hope is that now people are in dedicated roles, they're going to have that time and flexibility to invest in it as a space, because I think we've proven it works. You know, I understand that it was incorporated into marketing because it was a new channel and we weren't all 100% sure about this influencer marketing or creator thing. But I think we've very clearly proven that, you know, but as a means of getting to a consumer and creating a relationship and selling product, it actually does work.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. In fact, we have a division at Changer now that, you know, we work with some creators helping them with their brand deals and brand integrations. It's a smaller division, but the reason it's small is that we want to spend more time with the creator and the brands to better understand how to make that work properly, right? And it's been really good because spending that extra bit of time rather than trying to get like, you know, 1,000 creators on the books, like just working with a couple and working with some really good brands. We found that on both ends, it's worked really nicely. The brands got exactly sort of what they're after. We think about the strategy a little bit more and put it into place. But I think that also helps educate the brands generally on what they can do going forward. And I think more brands will have, as more companies sort of do that, hopefully that their practice becomes more prevalent, they'll understand that creator space better and can create more meaningful integrations with creators.
Yeah, that's so good. So then my last question to you, will flip back to the creator side. So kids now in high school, in primary school, when they're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? They say, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a creator. Is it too late to break into being a creator? If I quit my job today and said, I want to be a creator, is it too late? Or what do you think the future looks like?
Well,
I don't think so at all. I think it's the best time you could possibly ever want to be a creator. But Ant, you want to jump in first? I'll go after you.
There's like there's so much to unpack here. It's like this is it's we're not in a bad place when, you know, more kids want to say they want to be a YouTuber than any other job in the world. Like, pretty happy with where we're at as a business for that sort of thing. But you know, there's so much to that. It's like Danielle, you're in yourself a living proof of that. Imagine like just those skills being developed while you know, as you're, you know, graduating from high school and university or whatever. Like being able to understand and think and create like a creator is going to be such a useful, valuable skill. Like whatever you do in life and business, but then to go down the road as a creator or as an influencer, and you know, they're pretty interchangeable these days, depending on who you talk to. We could spend a whole podcast episode debating the merits of that. But like the opportunities, like it now is it's we're still only on the tip of the iceberg of like this space becoming like really professionalized and valued, and the opportunities that can unlock, like, you know, there's 10 years ago there was no one to look ahead to and say, well, that's a path I could follow. I can become a full-time YouTuber. That was like, you would have been laughed at, right? Like there was nobody. Now there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. You can see those pathways are being built. The businesses are investing time and capital into it. The brands are understanding, the business models are sort of starting to work themselves out. The platforms are becoming more sophisticated. So yeah, it's kind of like it's still very early days. So it's like, and it's not just about the creator either, like whether it's someone on camera or the writing the script, or there's so much more behind. You know, you said the beautiful term, the creator economy. There's so much behind it that is yet to be realized and is being built. Like editors, script writers, social media managers, business managers, CEOs, direct-to-consumer products, you name it. There's so much that behind these things, platform development, engineering. So like this creator economy, that is sort of, it's the Wild West, but it's really sort of, you know, building.
Fucking exciting. It's cool.
Yeah. You can tell I'm getting all giddy.
Great.
And it's what you said before, Danielle, like one of the big things about it is that there's the sophistication of the platforms, these algorithms, right? People think, like often the thing is, the algorithms are against me, but actually the algorithms are pretty much what makes it new creators able to jump onto the platform. The algorithms from TikTok, the algorithms from YouTube, they're developing. They're very, very good at uncovering new content and putting it in front of people who want to watch it. And the whole idea of all of these algorithms is to give the viewers what they want, right?
Yeah.
And the more sophisticated they get, the better they're going to find at funneling different niches of creators to different viewers. So the sophistication is something that's actually really good, and providing so many more new creators with opportunities to get in front of the right audience. But then the other part, and what Ant mentioned, is the support. Now, 10 years ago when we were trying to do this, there was no support for creators. There was very little. And it was very, very hard. Like, people didn't understand it. There were no revenue models. You almost laughed at when you said you were a YouTuber full time, but now, like you said, it's an aspirational element there. And there are companies all around the world that are building out the creator economy that are there to help support creators and give them infrastructure and help in the way like startups have that help now to make them, larger and better and more viable. And I think that is very exciting. It means that there will be a more, not linear pathway, but a better, easier pathway for those who want to be creators.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you talk about it sort of parallel to startups and the startup world and the startup industry, because I have a really hard time not thinking about creators as business owners. I think, like, holy shit, you just went audience first and value first, and you've got like this whole world of, product opportunities, revenue opportunities, and the infrastructure that is available now. I'm like, it is like starting a business now, where we've got, you can whip up a website in an afternoon. You've got all of your supporting tools. Like, you're right, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like everything was, a server in a room, and it was so hard to do everything. Like, everything's super easy to start a business now. I kind of love the parallels between those two. And being part of this movement of the creator economy is really exciting.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Well, you two have been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for spending your time with the Scrunch community today. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Daniel. I could talk about this all day long.
All day.
All day.